She was 19 the morning they told her she would be a wife by sunset. And the snow outside the small frontier house looked cleaner than she felt inside, untouched and cruelly bright, as if the world itself was mocking the heaviness settling in her chest. Her name was Eliza Mayfield, and until that morning, her life had been quiet misery, rather than fear, long days of washing, clothes in icy water, cooking meals she rarely tasted, and listening to her father's boots stomp through the house like a warning she had learned to obey without question. When he spoke her name that day, there was no warmth in it, only decision, sharp and final. He did not ask if she wanted to marry Caleb Harrow. Wanting had never been a language spoken in their home. He told her as one tells the weather or a debt coming due. Caleb Harrow was a man twice her age, known in town for his silence and his eyes that never softened, a man people stepped around rather than past. Eliza had seen him before, tall and broad-shouldered, always dressed in dark coats even in summer, his presence like a shadow that stretched longer than the man himself. She had feared him from a distance, the way a child fears thunder, loud, unpredictable, capable of breaking things. Now she was to belong to him. Her father spoke of money, of security, of how a girl like her should be grateful. And Eliza nodded because nodding had kept her safe her whole life. Inside, something small and fragile folded in on itself, a quiet part of her that had once believed she might leave this place, that she might marry for kindness, that love was not just a word whispered in books. She was never allowed to finish reading. By noon, the house was filled with neighbors who pretended not to see her trembling hands, women who adjusted her borrowed dress and told her she was lucky, men who congratulated her father on making a wise arrangement. No one asked if she was afraid. No one noticed how her breath came shallow, how she flinched when footsteps sounded too close behind her. When Caleb arrived, the room seemed to shrink. He removed his hat, snow melting along its brim, and nodded once to her father. His eyes met Eliza's only briefly, yet in that moment she felt seen in a way that made her stomach twist. Not with comfort, but with a sense of being measured, Wade claimed. The ceremony was quick, words spoken like obligations rather than promises. And when the preacher declared them husband and wife, a strange silence fell, heavy and expectant. Eliza felt the ring slide onto her finger, cold metal against colder skin, and she wondered if this was what the rest of her life would feel like. Tight, unyielding, inescapable. As they stepped outside, snow crunching beneath their feet, she realized she was walking toward a future she did not recognize, beside a man she did not know, bound by fear more than vows. Caleb helped her onto the wagon with careful, almost distant hands, and that confused her more than roughness would have. He did not speak as they rode through town, past familiar faces that now felt like strangers, past the schoolhouse, where she once stood outside, listening to lessons she was never allowed to attend. Every mile stretched her fear tighter, each turn of the wheel sounding like a closing door. When they reached his property at the edge of town, a large but lonely house surrounded by bare trees and silence, Eliza's heart hammered so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She braced herself for anger, for commands, for the life she had been warned about in whispers and sideways glances. But Caleb surprised her by stepping down first and offering his hand, his grip firm yet strangely gentle, as if he were afraid of breaking something already fragile. Inside the house, everything was clean, orderly, almost austere, like a place prepared for duty rather than warmth. He showed her where things were without touching her again, his voice low, controlled, careful. That night, Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, waiting for whatever came next, fear curling in her stomach like a living thing. When Caleb spoke, it was not a demand, but a statement, steady and unexpected. He told her she was safe here, that she would never be forced, that tomorrow there would be something he wished to give her, something promised long before the wedding day. Eliza did not know whether to believe him. Fear does not disappear because of words. It survives on memory and expectation. She lay awake long after the house fell silent, listening to the wind and wondering what kind of man promises safety without asking for trust. What kind of gift could possibly undo the terror she carried? And as the night stretched on, she did not know that by the next day, the quiet town that had watched her walk into marriage without protest would be shaken to its core, or that everything she believed about fear, power, and kindness was about to be tested. If you're already feeling the tension and want to know how this marriage changes everything, stay with this story and don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next will challenge every assumption you think you No morning came softly, pale winter light slipping through the frost-laced windows, and Eliza woke with her heart already racing, the weight of the previous day pressing down on her chest as if it had never loosened. Its grip during the night. She lay still for a long moment, listening, expecting heavy footsteps, a sharp voice, something to confirm all the fears she had carried into this marriage. But the house remained quiet, almost respectfully so, and that quiet unsettled her more than noise ever could. When she finally rose, she found a shawl neatly folded at the foot of the bed, thicker than the one she owned, warm and carefully mended, as if someone had taken the time to notice what she might need before she even asked. In the kitchen, a fire was already burning and a pot of porridge simmered gently, and Caleb stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the snow-covered fields like a man, waiting for something he could neither hurry nor avoid. He greeted her with a nod, offered her a bowl, and spoke little, but there was no coldness in his actions, only restraint, as though he were deliberately keeping a distance that confused her expectations. After breakfast, he told her it was time, that the wedding gift he had promised could not wait any longer, and though his voice remained calm, there was something heavier beneath it, something that made her hands tremble as she wrapped her shawl tighter around herself. Outside, the town was already stirring, people drawn from their homes by curiosity more than kindness, whispers spreading faster than footsteps as word passed that Caleb Harrow was bringing something into the square, something meant for his new wife. Eliza sat beside him in the wagon, her eyes fixed on her lap, every old fear rising again, because gifts, she had learned, often came with prices she could not afford to pay. When they arrived, the square filled quickly, familiar faces forming a loose circle, the same people who had congratulated her father, who had told her she was lucky, who had looked away when she could not meet their eyes. Caleb climbed down and helped her carefully, then turned to the crowd, his posture straight, his silence commanding in a way words never could. He spoke then, his voice carrying clearly through the cold air, and he said that before anything else, the town needed to hear the truth, because a marriage built on lies was no marriage at all. A murmur rippled through the crowd as he reached into the wagon and lifted out a heavy wooden chest, its surface worn, its lock old and scarred. He set it down in the center of the square and opened it slowly, deliberately, as though he wanted every person present to understand exactly what they were seeing. Inside were ledgers, papers, legal documents stamped and signed, and as he began to explain, the color drained from faces Eliza had known her entire life. Caleb told them he had been watching for years, that he had seen how girls were traded like debts, how fathers sold futures they did not own, how fear was treated as obedience and silence as consent. He revealed that he had gathered proof, names, records of payments and arrangements, including the one that had bound Eliza to him against her will. Gasps spread through the crowd as he read aloud, his voice steady, naming men who shifted uncomfortably, women who covered their mouths. Truths no one had wanted spoken now laid bare in the open air. Then he did something Eliza could never have imagined. He turned to her, placed the papers in her hands, and told her that the gift was not something he could keep, because it had never been his to own. He declared that their marriage contract, as written and signed, was void, that he had ensured it was legally unenforceable from the start, and that she was free to leave, free to choose, free to live without fear of him or anyone else. The square fell silent, the kind of silence that comes when a shared illusion shatters all at once. Eliza felt the world tilt, her breath catching as the meaning of his words slowly, painfully sank in. She looked at Caleb, truly looked at him for the first time, and saw not the monster her fear had created, but a man who had carried the weight of being misunderstood, so he could do what others would not. He explained that he had married her only to protect her, to remove her from a house that would have sold her again and again, and that the gift he promised was her freedom, backed by law, witnessed by the entire town. Shock turned to outrage among some, shame among others, and as voices rose, the sheriff stepped forward, having been quietly handed copies of the same documents weeks before, proof enough to begin arrests, investigations, reckonings long overdue. Eliza's knees weakened and Caleb caught her instinctively, steadying her without claiming, his hands respectful, his eyes searching her face not for gratitude but understanding. Tears blurred her vision as the crowd watched, stunned into stillness by a truth they could no longer deny, and in that moment, something inside her broke open, not fear, but the hard shell that had kept hope locked away. Caleb told her softly that she owed him nothing. Not obedience, not affection, not even forgiveness, and that whatever she chose next would be hers alone. As the square erupted into movement, men being questioned, women whispering fiercely, the old order unraveling thread by thread, Eliza realized that the gift had not only shocked the town, it had given her something she had never known how to imagine: agency. She spent the following days in a strange calm, watching consequences unfold, watching her father avoid her gaze, watching neighbors speak her name with a mixture of awe and regret. Caleb kept his distance, honoring his word, and in that space, Eliza began to feel something unfamiliar grow, not obligation, not fear, but curiosity. She saw how he worked quietly to help others who had been trapped by the same system, how he used his resources not for power but for repair, and slowly, carefully she chose to stay, not because she had to, but because she wanted to know the man who had given her freedom at the cost of his reputation. Their relationship, if it could even be called that, grew not from vows spoken under pressure, but from shared meals, honest conversations, and a mutual respect that felt revolutionary in a town still reeling from change. The story of the wedding gift spread far beyond the square, becoming a warning and a promise, and Eliza's name was no longer spoken with pity, but with strength. She learned that fear loses its power when exposed to truth, and that sometimes the most shocking gift is not what is given, but what is taken away: control, silence, injustice. And as she stood one evening, watching the sun set over fields that no longer felt like a prison, she knew her life was finally her own, shaped not by fear but by choice. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage can wear unexpected faces and that freedom is worth fighting for, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because stories like this deserve to be told, remembered, and shared.